Welcome to the South Coast Artist Index Gallery X Documentation Project Series, hosted by FitzGerald. The project is the first phase of an agenda to scan Gallery X's entire collection of documents, including news clippings, posters, flyers, photographs, and more. The scans will be archived and later mined for information specific to the artists who have had their work exhibited or who have performed at the city's oldest continually operating cooperative art gallery. Join Sean and his guests as they discuss the project and the history of Gallery X, its visual, performing, and literary artist members and volunteers.
Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artists Index, Gallery X Documentation Project. I'm your host for the series, Sean FitzGerald, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome in our first guest for this series. He's a known figure in the area. He's instrumental in this project and several others, and it gives me great honor to have him in the room. At this time, I would like to turn the microphone over to him so he can introduce himself and say a few words about himself.
Thank you, Sean. My name is Ron Fortier. That's, my goodness, the shoe's on the other foot because I do this on my own podcast. It's R-O-N and F-O-R-T-I-E-R. I'm a retired advertising guy who was really a painter, and I'm back to painting. And about 2012, Jeff Watton and I were talking about doing a project, and I mentioned Mary Jean Blasdale's advertisement in the Standard Times. I think this was in 1989, and I told Jeff that for some weird reason, I clipped it out and I put it in a binder, and wow. Years later, here I am talking to Jeff about it. I show him the clipping, and he said, wow, we could start a website project to document the artists of New Bedford.
Nice.
And okay, well, that was, we were still in the clutches of the recession.
Right, 2012. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or depression, as most people would like to refer to it. And we started doing that. And it's been a labor of love, a hobby, and in August of last year, 2023, we were able to organize as a nonprofit. And one of the reasons for that was because now we could receive donations, which were tax-deductible donations, mm-hmm. and it put a whole new spin on what we're doing. And it also meant that we could go out for bigger grants. I don't want to say more serious grants, but grants from organizations that require that you are a nonprofit. Mm-hmm. And I presented the concept of the Gallery X Documentation Project because I knew there was a treasure trove of documentation going back 35 years. And I know that there is information that has been forgotten that is going to be very valuable in the very near future. One of the things that we have not yet been able to accomplish was to create the actual index, quote unquote index, which was a directory of artists. Mm-hmm. And because at the time, the software for it really was either too expensive or in a case, I bought into a program, and our nephew is a super duper computer tech, deals with multinational corporations. And I said, hey, Chip, could you check this out for us? Mm-hmm. And he looked at it and he said, what is this garbage? I designed these programs. I don't even know how the heck to work this thing. So we put that on the back burner. But now things have changed. It's a little easier mm-hmm. to produce this. So now we have nearly 200 podcasts in the can. And what the scanning which is the documentation of the documents,
Right.
is going to do because of OCR, optical character recognition, and AI and a bunch of other things. We can extrapolate all this information on the posters. And now we have a pretty comprehensive list of every artist that ever hung a piece of work at Gallery X. And as you and I were talking earlier, and I mean this in a good sense, Gallery X is like a teething ring for artists in the South Coast.
Very true.
Nearly everyone who has grown as an artist, has introduced themselves at the gallery. No judgment, no jurying. If you can hang on the wall, it goes on the wall. And I think that's a pretty good thing.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things that, one of many things that attracted me to Gallery X was the inclusion, lack of judgment, almost so welcoming and uncommon in today's world. For my wife and I, who he was so kind enough to ask to participate in this program, she's going to be doing the scanning of the documents. She's started that already. But my point was that she and I, walking into Gallery X, my mother was actually one of the big proponents for Gallery X way back when, always telling me about it, cutting out the articles and the Standard Times and the different openings.
I didn't know that part.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, my mom was...
so
really,
history is making almost a full loop for you.
yes,
Now. Yeah.
and my mom actually took classes at Swain back in the day. So history has come full circle. When Christine and I began our journey together, she wanted to become an artist and pursue her education. And that was one thing that, as life sometimes takes us on our journeys, we have to pursue a career rather than a passion. But that's something that she was able to circle back on and pursue through school. And Gallery X welcomed us with open arms. So, when you asked about us helping out with this, it was just... sure, why not? We couldn't help but oblige. But one thing I really wanted to get back on real quick, we talked about Gallery X being a teething ring for almost everybody in this area. Let's touch a little bit more on that as far as...
Well, one of the things that really, when I came back into town, because I had, after a sudden divorce, decided I was going to Portugal to live and paint and so on and so forth. And there was no other plan B or anything like that. But as things work out sometimes, what you want and what you need are two different things. Sure. And I fell in love with this woman who still works here at Spectrum Marketing Group, where we're doing this, Jeff's organization, where we're doing this recording.
Is that right?
And in the short time that I was gone, living in Portugal, a lot had happened in the city, like rapidly. And now I had seen the ups and downs.
What years are we talking?
I'm talking about 2016,
Okay.
2016, 2017, around that time. And I had been around, enough. I had two advertising agencies, small agencies, and then my consulting business as well, because you always had to keep adapting and modifying in advertising. The technology changed, everything changed, media changed, and I saw this institution, the Gallery X, is still in business. And I remember them when they were on Spring Street, next to the Ladies of Hadassah thrift shop. And and then I think that was around the time where Jen Demers, who's, and I don't know, the labels we have to put on people, she's a special person, and that's all I'm going to say. And they accepted her work for a show. I believe, in fact, they gave her a one-woman show, to use that term.
Nice.
And I thought to myself, this is kind of cool. This is not something that you do just because.
Right.
And then I started to really see the dynamics of the organization, the public hanging, which they can't use anymore because it's no longer politically correct. There's a lot of sensitivities now, and I guess it's better to be oversensitive than it is to not be sensitive at all.
It's now known as the public exhibition.
The public exhibition.
Which, as an exhibitionist, I find that offensive.
I was just going to say something about exhibitionists, but anyway.
So I guess you know what I'm going to have to do at that opening. So
Exactly.
Tune in for that, folks.
Exactly. So I saw that, and I said to myself, wow, that's pretty cool. And so it stuck with me. I was a member for a short while. Brought my painting practice from Portugal back to the city, and then Jeff said, "Hey, because we had started this before I left for Portugal, you're going to start doing podcasts." And I'm like, "Whoa, I may have it's an old advertising joke. I may have a face for radio, but I don't have the voice." And
I think you do quite well. You do.
Well, thanks.
You have the gift of gab too, so that.
Well, that's the ADHD. So we started off again feeling around in the dark.
Right.
Pretty much the same thing. I mean, we interviewed, we tried, and DEI is a hateful term on one side, and it's a must-do term on another side politically. But basically, we tried to really show the diversity in this South Coast creative and cultural community. But that's the living. Those are the contemporary people. One of the drivers for me was the dead. And one of the greatest challenges that I've had, and people laugh, is getting those people to be mentioned on the show. Of course, I don't obviously think that they can be on the show because they're dead. But to get their relatives, friends, family, acquaintances, to bring information forward and say, hey, this is what I know about my Uncle Sal. And it's taken a while to discover why we haven't been able to get that many. Boston Mackey did bring his great uncle to the forefront. And Mike Morris, a photographer from Dartmouth, brought, to my surprise, and it was kind of an emotional thing, brought his great-grandfather, Mal Oliveira, who was my first and only private painting instructor.
Wow.
Before I went to college.
Wow.
And I still, every time I paint a certain thing, I feel him there. It's that kind of thing.
It brings you back.
But I realized that there are a lot of people who really, they want to memorialize, they want to create a legacy, they want to document their relatives, friends, and acquaintances' lives, but they're embarrassed because they don't know enough. And basically, all we want is to go back to Mary Jean Blasdale when she put that ad in, and it was 1989, in the Standard Times, which was something that lit me up back then. I cut it out and I put it into a binder with all other things that I keep that I thought were important. And then when I met Jeff, I mentioned that she was looking, I believe on that particular ad, there were 132 names. A name, a date, a birthday, anything. And it wasn't until I spoke with her that I realized what she was doing. If she could go to, the genealogy room in the library, where I spent a lot of hours doing research for the city way back when, but if she could go into the city directories and it would say, Sean FitzGerald, photographer, 123 Main Street, you were on the list, because that was primary documentation. Okay? And people would say, well, what about him? I don't know, but somebody will eventually go down that list and see that name and say, "That's my uncle. I've got a couple of his photographs, and I know where he went to school." That's what we want. So, the business model for the Artist Index is Stone Soup,
Stone Soup.
and it fits different categories. Stone Soup for you and Christine, because the grant money that we get, we have to go into the creative community and hire artists, give them a side gig, because we can't do it all.
Right.
So the money circulates in town. Stone Soup, because every little bit of information that is found and brought into the big pot is going to make this directory much more dynamic. Now, in speaking with Mrs. Blasdale, which I've had the honor and privilege of doing, and she was like agog that she was the inspiration for this thing. She did approximately from 1749 to 1949. She said, "Oh, if I was only younger and had the stamina,
Wow.
I'd love to work with you guys to do from 1949 to as far close to the publication date of this as possible."
Wow.
What we've done is we're looking for visual, literary, performing, and culinary artists. And bringing it back to the Gallery X documentation project, we know that there are names in there. It is like an archaeological dig.
Yeah, really. Yeah, I mean, my wife Christine is currently, as we mentioned, doing the scanning. And some of the flyers, the hand-drawn flyers, there's nothing like it. Today's day and age, everything is processed, everything's used with computers. I mean, technology's come so far, they can actually draw on tablets and so forth, but nothing like those old school flyers. Those graphics are just, they're works of art, some of them. They really are. You were talking earlier about, reproducing maybe even
a suite of them, say a suite of 10 or 12, there's always got to be a number, right?
You're talking about maybe making T-shirts of a few as well.
Yeah, exactly. Because, having gone to a couple of people and they just like, well, why would people want old posters for the whale who used to have the whale auction every year? Their posters were exquisite. They were silkscreen posters. I mean, they were frameable posters. People would have them hanging in their house, along with my friend Alan Scott and his wife, who were the founders of the Center Street Festival. I'd love to do a podcast or two on that.
Yeah.
Those posters became collector's items. So during one of the whale auctions, I remember when someone had their collection, it was an estate, I don't know what, they were moving, they put up their suite of prints that they had, and people were bidding furiously on those things. So why not? Why not Gallery X?
Yeah, why not? I think that's a great idea.
Yeah.
There's so much value there. And what is it that, for you, Ron, what is it that you want to see as a result of all of this?
Well, I know there are names that we will be able to bring back to light. Some of these people have passed on. Some of these people have gone on to bigger and better things. And in New Bedford, we love to know that we're connected to greatness. I remember speaking with Naomi Slip, the curator at the Whaling Museum. She said she, from not being from around here until she came to her position in the Whaling Museum, it's either it all originated here or it came here.
I see.
I mean, we can rattle off a list of famous names in arts and culture. There's just something about this city. It's almost like a crossroads when you consider it's the correct term is a terminal city because it's a peninsula.
Right.
So terminal meaning you drive in and you have to turn around and drive out. It's not like Fall River, which is a crossroad town where everybody crosses through. So there's a geographic mentality. And of course, we're the city that lit the world. There's that whole thing there. But I told Christina that there's a term, I can't remember the correct title, travels of a T-shirt, something to that effect. It was, it might have been an economics instructor. And there's something, when you put your used clothing into one of those boxes on the roadside, there is an entire industry behind those boxes. People don't think of what happens to this stuff because they don't care. They want to get rid of it. And there is the rag industry, or the wipe, they call wipe industry, that use these for wiping industrial solvents, and then of course now they're all and then they throw them away, so they're getting another life. But there's also rock concert T-shirts, and they would fill a container full and ship them to Africa for this market called the Matumba. And the Matumba dealers invest their money in these containers, and they go through them, and they're looking for what they call snowflakes. And the snowflakes are T-shirts. For example, Led Zeppelin live at the Boston Square Garden, 1970, in almost never worn. This thing at auction would pay for that entire container of T-shirts.
Right.
In that mindset, I'm curious to see if Christine can find something in there that is like, oh my God, nobody remembers. Yeah. Everybody forgot. This is incredible.
Right.
Let's call this person back to the city for whatever.
Yeah.
Or it just gives us one of the concepts that we had was, I use the term DNA, but because now DNA is much more in the forefront, people understand it better. Through practical experience, people get a little confused. But let's talk about a family tree. Imagine a family tree being now turned into an artist's or creative community tree, where my instructor, I'll use Ed Tonieri, who was the lead developer for acrylic paint. He's the guy he was the granddaddy of artist acrylic paint. He was a student of Hans Hofmann. David Loeffler Smith, who was a beloved faculty member at Swain. Now, Tonieri was he was the founding faculty of what was the art department. This is previous to the College of Visual and Performing Arts at SMU. Actually, it was SMTI, Southeastern Massachusetts Technological Institute, which didn't turn into Southeastern Massachusetts University, that's what it was when I was there. And David Loeffler Smith, who was at the Swain School of Design, he was a student of Hans Hofmann.
Okay.
So almost like in that biblical sense, and he begat, and he begat,
right.
and he begat. There is this thing, this vibe in this community amongst the artists. You can just pick up on it. That's always been intriguing to me as a geek, and I can't quite articulate it better than what I just did.
I don't think you can really put it into words. I know exactly what you're talking about, though. I felt it too. I still do. It's there's something about that building that just inspires passion.
Yeah. Well, I saw Michael Pietragala, who was one of, I think he may have been number one, the first podcast. Yeah. And at one point we were talking about somebody, it might have been in Rolling Stone, decided that there was a genealogy of rock bands. Because everybody remembers the rock band that remembers Linda Ronstadt, but they don't remember she was with Stone Pony, and the members of Stone Pony. So it just keeps going, spreading out. Everybody's connected. Yeah. The community is not small, and it's not geographically restricted. I remember when my friend Bill had a band. There was another band in the area where the drummer had the bass pedal from Can't remember now. I'm blanking out on it, but it was the predecessor to Vanilla Fudge.
No, sir.
So I mean, it's like that kind of, and there are people
so
who just
cool.
geek out on that kind of stuff, right?
No, that's very cool.
Because again, now there's that connection. People want to be connected.
Right. And what I found about Gallery X, just the people that have been so involved for so many years. I mean, the term family is often overused, but it really is. It rings true there. And they welcomed us with open arms, and we enjoy giving back as much as possible. Clearly, and I've had this conversation with a number of people. I don't know what it is about that building, but it grabs a hold of you, and it really, it can transform you.
Yeah, they have, I think, under the tenure of Zachary White, and I'm going to call him out, because under his tenure, there's been a shift, a ground shift of some sort. People get used to doing, it's New England, so it's like, oh, we've always done it that way.
Right.
You know what I mean? Right. But slowly, with his gentle prodding, little things, and I have to thank him for supporting this project. And it was he that showed me all the binders and the bankers boxes, full of, oh my God, I mean, almost like a gallery full, a couple of galleries full of posters of 35 years gone by, because obviously they can't fit in the binders.
Right.
But they have documented the legacy of the whaling industry. They have finally begun, and they're still in their infancy, documenting the fishing industry. The textile industry, that I know Joe Thomas has tried to get that going. And it's because these were industries that were manned, to use that term, by the common people, the regular people. And it was a job. Why am I gonna restore a fishing boat? It's a tool. It was a tool to go out and get the fishing, bring it back. But I think we're a little bit smarter than that now. And the creative community has expanded into so many other areas. We have been looking for underwriters. We thank Neil Weiss, who's our first underwriter, who is underwriting the jazz podcast series, the first podcast series that we've ever done. It's a 10-episode series. And the podcast host is David Reese, who was a DJ at WUSM for 26 years, a radio announcer, and a jazz radio host. And just the amount of information that Dave carries in his head is going to fill pages of transcripts for us. So we have communities that we're focused on, and we have disciplines that we're focused on. We just did our first live stream podcast for AHA for June Pride at Play Arcade. And we had members of the LGBTQ plus community there. Andy Pollock, Herbie Thompson, Jim Mercer, and Sarah Cogswell. Just a scratch on the surface of gay people in the creative community. That community now, as a gold mine, so to speak, or a mine, can bring up so many different people. David Bartlett Boyce, who was an artist, he was also the art reviewer for the Standard Times, who was also, in his particular case, was involved in Stonewall. And George Siegel's sculpture, Stonewall sculpture, one of the figures is supposed to be David Bartlett Boyce. Well, why does that matter? Well, why wouldn't it matter? Why do we have to stop talking about it once it's been said? So in that community, you have visual performing, literary, culinary artists, just in that community alone. Of course, each one of those is a standalone discipline. Cape Verdean community, we have photography, we have performers, but in the performing arts, we've got jazz, we've got Tavares, which can't be written off. I mean, and then we also have the traditional music of Cape Verde, Murna, okay, one of the traditional styles of music. So just in that community alone, and there's more.
Right.
There's much more in there. One of the other driving forces is my mother. She's going to be 98 in September. Sort of Damocles for me, because I've heard friends going, "Oh, it's been 20 years since my mother died. I can remember the sound of her voice, the touch of her hand, the last meal we had together, whatever." And I can understand how they feel, because my father passed sooner than he was supposed to. But I'm frightened to death, because it's like, how many more years, God? How many more years? I mean, it's just like dangling, But she was a fado singer, and according to Gloria DeSa, a friend and colleague at UMass, she was the Center for Portuguese Studies at UMass Dartmouth. I think the first article I wrote for the Artist Index was about my mother. And Gloria DeSa said, "Do you realize what you've done, Ron?" And I said, "I wrote an article about my mother." She said, "Yeah, you've documented the only woman of her generation, fado singer in this town that we're aware of."
Wow.
And then someone had mentioned to me along the line that it's an African proverb that you die twice. The first time is when you draw your last breath. The second time is when the last person to speak your name draws their last breath. So I feel it incumbent upon me to do this, not just for my own mother, which I've just marginally documented, but it's a lot more. I mean, what about the other women and men that she sang with in all those Portuguese clubs back in the 50s and 60s? And I think it's important.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's important.
Yeah, you have to start somewhere.
Right.
What better way and place to start than right there?
Right. Now, your own background, right? With the Rude Boys. Tell us about that.
Well, the Rude Boys are they're a ska band. Ska is essentially reggae music mixed with some jazz influences, like reggae with horns. We've been performing in the area since 2018. Myself and 7 other musicians from all walks of different lives, in different musical incarnations, if you will, got together and started to play this music, and we continue to, recording some original stuff right now. And the NB Rude Boys would play in the New England area, Boston, Providence, have an EP out, Welcome to Rude, Bedford. But it's a lot of fun to do that, as well as some real estate and some case management work, helping the homeless find permanent housing in the city, which, as you can imagine, is quite challenging. Yeah,
it's going to become more so too, right?
It really is. It's that's the dirty little secret that nobody wants to acknowledge, but it's just growing, But enough of that. Enough of me, Ron.
Well, no, the reason why I asked is and it's also hard to switch hats because I'm usually like in the host seat, right? Not the guest seat. The reason why I asked is because, again, there's your story. And your story splinters out into 6 more stories because each one of you are band members. And each one of theirs splinters out again.
And the other projects. And
exactly.
We're very community-based, involved in fundraising and so forth. So I feel that's important, especially the older that we've gotten. Similar to you with this program, this project, I should say, what can we give back? What can we help in this community? How can we give back? How can we harness the talent that we have to affect change and affect history? And, every once in a while we'll go through our lulls. Artists have it where they can't produce. Musicians get it too. Performers sometimes stage fright. You also you get tired of it. And I remember one time taking a break, and I had a friend of mine. He saw him at the mall, and he's like, what are you doing with yourself? I said, well, I'm taking a little break. He's like, what's the matter with you? He said, don't you realize, that you do a service to people? You kind of take it for granted. You do a service to people. You do things that other people can't. They wish they could do. That's why they go out to see you perform. That's why they go out to see your works, as a painter like yourself.
Right.
So in that respect, we kind of have this responsibility too for the people who can't, and sometimes I lose sight of that. It's important to keep that also. Never mind just wanting to produce or feeling to produce. In my experience, there's it gets to a point where, I don't know, once you start doing so much, people tend to rely on it. I think that's wonderful. It's kind of talk about circling back.
Yeah.
That's a whole...
J. Peterman of the J. Peterman catalog, which a lot of younger people only think was a character in Seinfeld. Mm-hmm. Well, he was a character written into Seinfeld, but he actually existed because he was the president and founder of the J. Peterman catalog. J is just in J, the letter J. And he had a little manifesto, and he got all these people, all this advice from all these people who knew about direct mail back, and that's what they called, what online sales was direct mail back then. Mm-hmm. And he asked them all these questions, and they told him all the things he shouldn't do. Well, he went out and did everything they told him not to do, and he became enigmatic, and he became successful. And he had this little manifesto, and one of the lines I still remember well is, when will American businesses realize that people want things that make their lives the way they wish they were? And I remember that when my sister called me from Florida, and she's like, Ron, you used to cook, right? Yeah. Well, check out these pots and pans, blah 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 blah. And this is just at the beginning when we had email and such. Check it out. And I was like, Terry, you're going to spend $400 on these pots and pans. Is that going to make you a better cook? And I'm like saying you're not a good cook, but is that going to make you a better cook? Right. And she's like, oh, I didn't think about it that way. Right.
You can buy the Air Jordans, but
exactly. You're still not going to jump, and you still can't dunk. Yeah. But and that's the human condition.
Yeah. And I think that also as artists, I think for the audience or the public, I think it includes them, whether they can perform or whether they are an artist. I think going and viewing and being a part of it, they become part of that whole thing. It becomes, I had one guy tell me, I met my wife at one of your shows. I met her, we started dating, da-da-da-da-da. And he's like, yeah, the night we had our first child, it was consummated at your show. So it's kind of, I really... Well, thought about this. Talk about involvement.
You become part of people's lives.
You really do, so also, look at this. We've got this piece of art here on the wall.
Yeah.
Isn't that becomes a part of? There we go. We're on Fortier original. Doesn't that become part of your life too? You buy this painting, you put it in your dining room, and every day when you eat
and people want to know the story.
That's
Where
right.
did you get it? Who made it? Mm-hmm. It's not just there to cover a hole in a wall.
Right.
So there is that.
And I think that in some sense they can identify with you. That's Ron's painting. There's that connection that you don't get anywhere else in any other kind of line of work, right?
Yeah. No, you don't. I did advertising, and at one point it was like, well, at least it's not something else. It's artistic, it's creative, and I got into it, but in the back of my head it was like, no, this is not there.
What was it for you that got you into art? What was your interest?
Well, my parents separated when I was before I could walk, my mother took me with her to New York. I mean, listeners of the podcast will have heard this story several times. She moved in with her uncle, my granduncle, who was a former Portuguese language newspaper publisher. The guy founded 6 Portuguese language newspapers in New England.
Wow.
Ran into something which I'm still trying to ferret out in the genealogy. And he was a cultural maven. There's no other word for it. I still have flashbacks to him taking me to every gallery, every museum in New York. It seemed like on a daily basis. And there was this one scene from Night at the Museum with Ben
Stiller.
Ben Stiller. That one scene sort of it was like somebody just threw something on top of me. It was or a slap or whatever. It was oh my God. I was brought into that. I can tell you where I was standing when I saw it. The same thing happened to me with Basquiat, the bioflick, Julian Schnabel's, with Jeffrey Wright as Basquiat. At the very beginning of the movie, the camera is doing this dolly pan, and you can see Basquiat as a child holding onto his mother's hand, and they're standing almost on the threshold of the opening to the gallery where Picasso's Guernica is hanging.
Okay.
And I had that sort of, bang,
That
flash.
was the moment.
Yeah. And so I guess that was an influence. And then being an only child, for 12 years. And, just my wiring in my head, that's what I was predisposed to do. And not being able to do it, I think I'm the only MFA ever to teach in the Charlton College of Business at UMass Dartmouth.
Really?
I taught marketing there.
Wow.
Just based
impressive.
on my business that I had. I was offered the job on the spot. But again, it wasn't, and it's taken me a while to get to where I am now. I just, and every time I think I've crossed that last bridge, there's another bridge to cross. And I think that's really what it's all about for all of us. Before you did ska, what did you do before that?
Musically, I was involved with a band where it was more rock and funk type stuff. Another incarnation, we did more heavily based stuff. I got into music essentially through drama. I was heavily involved in drama in high school, and I was approached my senior year about singing in a band, which I'd always admired singers, and I tried to sing, but I never had any training whatsoever. And the guys who approached me, they didn't know how to play their instruments, so they'd seen me speak publicly, and they're like, we need you to get up on stage and take attention away from the fact that we don't really know what we're doing. So that was my job. Besides singing, that was my main job. So that was kind of, I took my drama background and incorporated that into a lead singer persona. And it's...
Yeah, they don't call him frontman for nothing.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah, it's something that...
But you see, these two stories each related. Those are just our two.
Right.
Now, imagine what Christine is going to dig up, all these different names, all these different lives. One of the other things is, my art instructors, the last two that passed away were Bill Elliott, whose wife is a weaver, a fiber artist, and still active. She just had a show of his, a retrospective at the Dartmouth Cultural Center a couple of months back. I think it was in April. And all of his colleagues, Frank McCoy, who passed away, I believe, just after him. And then there was Ed Tonieri, who has a remarkable history. The guy ended up as a painter and a painting instructor because he was a clarinet player in the USO during World War II, and there was a bar fight and someone smashed him in the face and split his lip and ruined his career, and he used a GI Bill to go back to school and
to become an artist.
become an artist. I think it was always something.
So he wasn't able to play clarinet anymore.
Yeah, exactly. That's the story I remember him telling me. And of course, as you get older, some of the memories get all intermeshed and such.
That's inspiring, though.
And then his Alma Cummings' dad, Herb Cummings, who I always call him the only Buddhist Quaker I've ever known, which is a whole other story in itself. But again, each one of these guys has a story based on my relationships with them and others, my classmates and such. They were faculty members. They were successful. They made money. They put food on the table. They had galleries. They sold work. They're gone. Where are they now? Where can I go see a Herb Cummings? Where can I go to see an Ed Tornieri? One of my classmates found one of Tornieri's pieces in a thrift shop.
Wow.
A little piece of work. I think that was like $10 or something for it.
They live on in their pieces and in the stories, in the memories. And that's why these things, what we're doing here, is so important, to memorialize them. And
Richard Connor, I think he's Dr. Richard Connor, major collector. And now I think he's handling, 5 or more estates of artists, because that's another thing that's happening. There's all this work floating around, but how is this work associated with the person? So there's a lot of that, and it's important. And being a history geek, you want to know more. Strange things. My sister-in-law, who's an avid genealogist, we were talking about how my French-Canadian side goes all the way back to Normandy, France. My Portuguese side, I can only get it back to 1878. Part of it is because my mother would always say, if you were poor, you were nothing. You never existed. But part of it is because her father was a Jew, a crypto Jew. But I know that we have no Americana in us. And so she calls me up after that conversation a couple of weeks after, and she says, remember you said that you have no connection to America, and its founding? Yeah. She says, do you have this specific person in your family tree? Can you remember? I said, yeah, that rings a bell. Why? Look it up. Look it up. Go check it out, and then get back to me. So I looked it up, and I got back to her, and I said, yeah, he and his wife, this matches, and the dates, yeah, they all match. Well, congratulations, brother-in-law. You are eligible to join the Sons of the American Revolution. And I said, I don't have a patriot in the family. It's all French on one side, Canadian to Normandy, France, and Portuguese. No, you don't understand. Louis-Marie Fortier fought with General Benedict Arnold at Fort Ticonderoga against the British. He was part of a Canadian contingent who said, you want us to help kick the British ass? We're there.
Right. Had no problem with it.
And then I found out that his father died in 1756 in the defense of Quebec.
Really?
From an attack on by the British. So again, most people are like, yeah, so what? Who cares? Everybody's got that kind of stuff in their family. Well, that just leaves me quiet, and that's tough to do. I mean, why don't you care?
It's important. It's so vitally important. I mean, we have to know who we are to know where we're going, I think.
So when you get Christine on this show to speak with her about, what have you found? And totally on her, she's going to say, okay, I got this whole list of names. These people I know, these people I've never heard of. And she's going to come up with something that I don't even think I could have thought of forward thinking, on what ifs or that kind of thing.
It's exciting. She's enjoying it, and I'm enjoying it too, because she keeps showing me what she's finding, and like a kid on Christmas morning, literally. It's so thankful for Zach to have located those. Zachary White. Can't speak enough about what he's done for Gallery X, and how he's helped transform that gallery and bring us into the 21st century. And really, we've made some strides there. we're finally not in the red any longer. Still trying to raise funds wherever we can, but wouldn't be where we are without him. So thank you, Zach.
Yeah, exactly.
I intend on having him in.
Yes.
As one of our, I think it's vitally important that
it is vitally
he speaks
important.
to what he saw when he got there, and
Right.
what he's been doing and what his intentions are for the future with the gallery.
I'm curious about Ken Davies, who was a well-known painter in his day and age. He was also a friend of Ed Tanieri. He had his studio, believe it or not, I think in the same building where Tia Maria's cafe is.
Oh, okay.
But he had some substance abuse issues, and it was like the romanticized life of the artist. It has to be some sort of alcoholic hell, or just being crazy people or whatever. But I'm wondering if he showed at Gallery X, and I think also part of what this information is going to do, it's going to give Gallery X a perspective. It's like when your parents or your grandparents die and you're going through their things and you find out things about them that you never ever knew.
Yeah, it's very true. It's very true.
Where dad was way cooler than you ever thought he was.
Yeah, a lot of that comes with age. You start to realize these things that you just didn't give time to when you were younger.
Yeah.
You spoke about your mom earlier, and I lost my mom in 2015, and it was one of the most difficult things I've ever gone through. And the only way I was able to find solace, Ron, was it took about 1.5 years. And then one day I just realized, I don't know if it was David Bowie's passing, and I realized that he wasn't that much older than me, that I came to the realization that we're all going to be there very quickly. Enough of that. It's time to get on with things, So that's what helped me. And that's one thing too, not to get too deep, but I think that death is something that we need to embrace a little bit more in our society rather than shun it. I think if we did, we'd be a lot better at accepting it and encroaching these questions that we have and these problems that we encounter.
Another African proverb is when a person dies, a library burns down. That's another important thing. And Jeff and I have already discussed this. I mean, Jeff is 10 years younger than my eldest daughter, and he's bound and committed that this is going to go on after he's gone. It's a legacy.
It is.
We're just going to keep passing the baton, and hopefully we keep adding more and more. I keep talking about Stone Soup as the business model. Funds come in and funds support local artists. Information comes in, it goes into the database that we're building. And again, that Stones, we would be nothing without those memories, without that data, without that information, because you just really never know. And I can see the man's face, but Boston Mackey's great uncle or great uncle, I don't remember, but just look up Boston Mackey or Mark Cavallo on theartistindex.com and it'll take you to that particular episode. His uncle was a set designer, and he designed the sets for Al Jolson's The Jazz Singer.
Talking about genetics there.
And far-reaching and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Again, and it's just one. There was a television series in the 60s called The Naked City. And they would all show that little bit of a preview, the teaser, and then the announcer would kick in to open the show and be, there are 1 million stories in the Naked City. This is another one.
This is another one, though.
Yeah. And that's what we're looking to do.
It reminds me of that class that was being taught, the 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon.
The separation, yeah.
Six, about how everybody in Hollywood, did you hear about that?
Yeah.
They've all been in some production in some way with Kevin Bacon.
Yeah.
Somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
We are all connected.
And there's that Timmy Westfall hypothesis. Timmy Westfall was the son of one of the surgeons on St. Elsewhere, the television series.
Okay.
And if you look it up, there's this connectivity between St. Elsewhere and every other television show ever.
Oh, yeah.
It's just overlap. It's just the most, people crossovers. I mean, look at Law and Order. I mean, Belker.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Who was he was
Stand-up
Belker
comedian.
Yeah, same guy.
Yeah.
Same guy.
Yeah,
Right.
he redefined himself later in life too. I mean, he was in his 50s when he got that role.
Yeah. So that's what we're looking to do. And with Christine doing the yeoman's job of digging through, doing the archaeological dig, and then with you documenting her progress, and speaking with the guests that you have lined up, that's really going to put the shine on the apple. And I think this is, as I wrote the grant, I said it is not possible for us to do everything that we have set out to do with this one project.
Right.
There's probably got to be 2 more projects that we have to apply for.
I agree.
To totally finish this off.
Mm-hmm. I agree. It's somewhat monumental of a task, but certainly not impossible.
Yeah.
And we're excited.
Yeah.
We really are. It's important work, and I think the public's going to love it. I really do. And I really want to thank you before I forget. I want to thank you and Jeff for starting this whole thing. It's, we talked about community, family. We're all cousins. I've always believed we're all cousins.
Right.
And this is important stuff that we're going to find.
Oh, we
in
found
the
out
future.
we're connected. I just remembered, right? How is it that we're connected?
Refresh my memory.
It's either by friends or by family. Believe it or not,
Yeah, I think it was
a
family,
weird.
right?
Yeah, it's a weird connection. It's like now I can't remember. It was like
Right? Yeah.
We
were
did
talking about
it was on a fly when you mentioned it. It's like,
Right.
oh my god.
We're talking about, I think, at one of the openings.
Yeah, exactly.
Might have been your opening at the Co-Creative, I think.
Could have been when I did the triptych there.
I have to do that Ancestry.com.
Yeah, you do.
Things just to see exactly what was going on. That's a whole other podcast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's for sure. That's for sure.
So yeah, I want to thank you and Jeff for starting this whole thing.
You're welcome.
This whole initiative is so needed, and we're not going to see the effects of it, I think, until years to come. And like you said, it's important work. I can't wait to see what else we get as we move along and prod ahead.
Mm-hmm.
I want to thank Ron Fortier for being our first guest here on the South Coast Artists Index Gallery X documentation project. I am your host, Sean G. FitzGerald, and I can't wait to speak with you again. You have yourself an outstanding day.
You have been listening to the South Coast Artist Index Gallery X series. This series and the documentation project was made possible by ArtNet and Wicked Cool Places, funded by the City of New Bedford through the American Rescue Plan Awards and its Arts, Culture, and Tourism Fund, and is facilitated by New Bedford Creative at the NBEDC.